What happens when Hollywood royalty meets actual royalty on live television, and everything goes catastrophically wrong? You won't believe what unfolds when Meghan Markle sits down with Jimmy Kimmel for what was supposed to be a friendly chat about her latest projects, only to have it spiral into one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night television history. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe what unfolds. Last night's episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live started like any other. The studio audience was buzzing with excitement, cameras were rolling, and Jimmy was delivering his usual opening monologue with that signature smirk we all know so well. But what nobody in that Hollywood Boulevard studio could have predicted was that they were about to witness television history in the making, and not the good kind. Meghan Markle walked onto the set looking absolutely stunning in a cream-colored designer blazer, her hair perfectly styled, flashing that megawatt smile that had charmed millions around the world. The audience erupted in applause as she gracefully made her way to the guest chair, waving and blowing kisses like the seasoned performer she once was. Jimmy stood up to greet her with the customary hug and cheek kisses, but even in those first few seconds, something felt off. The hug lasted just a beat too long, and when they pulled apart, there was a flicker of something, tension, perhaps, that crossed both their faces. "Welcome back to the show, Meghan," Jimmy said as they settled into their seats, his voice carrying that familiar warmth but with an undertone that suggested he had something brewing. "It's been a while since we've had you here, and boy, have things changed since then." The audience chuckled, but Meghan's smile seemed to tighten just slightly around the edges. She adjusted her posture, crossing her legs with deliberate precision, and fixed Jimmy with a look that said she was ready for whatever he might throw her way. "Oh, things have definitely changed, Jimmy," she replied, her voice smooth as silk but with a hint of steel beneath. "But then again, some things never change, do they?" The way she emphasized some things sent a ripple through the studio audience, and you could practically feel the temperature in the room shift. Jimmy's eyebrows raised slightly. He was clearly intrigued by this unexpected pushback right out of the gate. What followed was several minutes of seemingly pleasant small talk about her recent projects, her life in California, and her various philanthropic endeavors. But anyone watching closely could see the undercurrents of tension building with each exchange. Jimmy's questions became increasingly pointed, and Meghan's responses grew more guarded and defensive. She kept glancing at the audience, as if gauging their reactions, while Jimmy seemed to be enjoying himself a little too much, like a cat playing with a mouse. The first real crack in the facade came when Jimmy brought up her relationship with the media. "You know, Meghan, you've had quite the journey with the press over the years," he said, leaning back in his chair with that deceptively casual pose he's perfected. "From actress to duchess to, well, whatever we're calling this current phase." The audience laughed, but it was uncomfortable laughter, the kind that happens when people sense they're witnessing something they probably shouldn't be. Meghan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her smile never wavered. "I think authentic is the word you're looking for, Jimmy," she said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "Unlike some people, I've never felt the need to hide behind a character or a persona. What you see is what you get." The implication was clear, and Jimmy's smile faltered for just a moment before returning full force. "Oh, I don't know about that," Jimmy shot back, his tone still playful but with a bite that hadn't been there before. "I mean, we've all seen the various versions of Meghan Markle over the years. The Hollywood actress, the humanitarian, the royal, the victim, the entrepreneur. It's quite the repertoire." The studio fell silent except for a few nervous coughs from the audience. Meghan's knuckles were white as she gripped the armrest of her chair. But what happened next would set the stage for the most dramatic confrontation in late-night television history. The moment of truth came when Jimmy decided to dig deeper into territory that Meghan clearly considered off-limits. He leaned forward with that mischievous glint in his eye that regular viewers know means trouble is brewing. "You know what I "Find fascinating, Meghan?" he said, his voice dripping with mock curiosity. "How someone can go from being relatively unknown to commanding multi-million-dollar deals and having the world's attention, all while playing the victim card. It's quite remarkable, really." The studio audience collectively held its breath. You could hear a pin drop as Meghan's composure began to crack in real time. Her perfectly practiced smile finally faltered, replaced by a look of barely contained fury. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "I'm sorry, are you actually suggesting that I've somehow manipulated my way into success? That the racism, the death threats, the complete destruction of my mental health was all part of some grand scheme?" Jimmy shrugged with infuriating casualness. "I'm not suggesting anything, Meghan. I'm just observing patterns. You had a moderately successful acting career, married into the most famous family in the world, and when that didn't work out exactly as planned, suddenly everyone else became the villain in your story. It's quite the narrative arc." That's when Meghan truly snapped. She uncrossed her legs and leaned forward, her eyes blazing with an intensity that made everyone in the studio shift uncomfortably in their seats. "You know what, Jimmy? You want to talk about narratives? Let's talk about yours. Here you are, night after night, hiding behind your desk making jokes about people's real pain and trauma, thinking you're some kind of moral authority. But what are you really? You're just another middle-aged white man in Hollywood who's never had to face a single day of the scrutiny that I've endured." The audience was stunned into complete silence. This wasn't the polite, media-trained Meghan they were used to seeing. This was raw, unfiltered rage, and it was terrifying to witness. Jimmy's face flushed red, but he tried to maintain his composure with a nervous laugh. "Wow, okay, well, I think we're getting a little heated here." "No, no, no," Meghan interrupted, her voice rising. "You started this, Jimmy. You wanted to poke the bear? Well, congratulations, you got her attention. You sit there night after night making jokes about my family, my marriage, my struggles, thinking it's all fair game because I'm a public figure. But you know what you are. You're a bully with a platform. And frankly, I'm sick of people like you thinking you can say whatever you want about me and my family without consequences." Jimmy's mask was starting to slip now. His usual jovial demeanor was replaced by something harder, more defensive. "Look, Meghan, comedy is about pushing boundaries. If you can't handle a few jokes, maybe public life isn't for you. I mean, you signed up for this when you married into the royal family. You can't have it both ways. You can't want the fame, and the platform and the money, and then complain when people talk about you." That was the breaking point. Meghan stood up so abruptly that her chair nearly toppled backward. The studio cameras were capturing every second of this meltdown in high definition, and the producers in the control room were probably having heart attacks trying to decide whether to cut to commercial. "How dare you?" she hissed, pointing an accusatory finger at Jimmy. "How dare you sit there and tell me what I signed up for? I signed up to serve, to make a difference, to use my platform for good. I didn't sign up to be your punchline or anyone else's." The tension in the studio was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Jimmy was clearly rattled now, his usual quick wit seemingly deserting him in the face of Meghan's fury. "Meghan, I think you need to calm down. Don't you dare tell me to—" "Calm down," she exploded, her voice echoing through the stunned studio. "That's exactly the kind of patronizing garbage I've had to deal with for years. A woman stands up for herself, expresses legitimate anger about legitimate grievances, and immediately she needs to calm down. Well, I'm done calming down, Jimmy. I'm done smiling and nodding while people like you profit off tearing me down." What happened in the next few moments would shock even the most seasoned television viewers. Jimmy, clearly feeling cornered and embarrassed in front of his live audience, made the fatal mistake of doubling down instead of backing off. He stood up to match Meghan's aggressive posture, his face now completely flushed with anger and humiliation. "You know what, Meghan? You want to talk about profiting off drama? Let's talk about your entire brand. Everything you do is calculated for maximum sympathy and attention. The Oprah interview, the Netflix deal, the podcast. It's all one big pity party designed to keep you relevant and keep the checks coming in. The audience gasped audibly. This had crossed every line of professional decorum, and everyone knew it. Meghan's eyes widened in disbelief before narrowing into slits of pure fury. Are you seriously going to sit there and question my integrity? You, Jimmy Kimmel, who built your entire career on mocking people's pain. You want to talk about calculated? What about your little blackface sketches? What about all the women who've come forward about your behavior behind the scenes? At least, I own my mistakes instead of hiding behind fake apologies and PR teams. The studio erupted in shocked murmurs. This was nuclear warfare now, and both combatants were throwing everything they had at each other. Jimmy's face went white, then red again. How dare you bring up things that have been addressed and resolved years ago? You're deflecting because you know I'm right about you. You're a manipulator who uses your race and your gender as weapons whenever anyone dares to question your actions. That accusation hung in the air like poison gas. The audience was completely silent now, many looking genuinely uncomfortable and probably wondering if they should leave. Meghan's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout could have. There it is. There's the real Jimmy Kimmel. You just accused a biracial woman of weaponizing her race because she dared to call out your racism. You just proved every single point I've ever made about the media and about people like you. Jimmy realized he'd gone too far, but pride and embarrassment wouldn't let him back down. I'm not racist, Meghan. I'm calling out hypocrisy. You can't hide behind identity politics every time someone criticizes your behavior. Sometimes people dislike you because of your actions, not because of what you look like. Actions? Meghan's voice was getting louder again, building toward another explosion. What actions, Jimmy? Marrying someone I love? Trying to modernize an archaic institution? Standing up for myself when that same institution threw me to the wolves? Or maybe you're talking about my action of sitting here tonight, trying to promote my charity work, while you ambush me with this disgusting display of misogyny and racism disguised as comedy. The confrontation was spiraling completely out of control. Now, Jimmy, perhaps realizing that his career might be in jeopardy, tried to regain some semblance of control. Look, this has gotten way out of hand. Maybe we should take a break and— Oh no, Meghan cut him off savagely. You don't get to start a fire and then act surprised when everything burns down. You wanted this confrontation, Jimmy. You planned this whole thing, didn't you? This wasn't about promoting my work or having a normal interview. This was about humiliating me on live television for your ratings. Well, congratulations, you got your moment. I hope it was worth destroying whatever credibility you had left. The accusation that this was premeditated seemed to hit Jimmy like a physical blow. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water before he found his voice again. That's completely untrue, and you know it. You're the one who came in here with an attitude from the very beginning. You're the one who turned a simple interview into a screaming match because you can't handle any criticism whatsoever. Criticism? Meghan laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound that made everyone in the studio flinch. Is that what you call that racist garbage you just spewed? Questioning whether I deserve my success, suggesting I manipulate situations for sympathy, accusing me of weaponizing my identity? That's not criticism, Jimmy. That's character assassination, and you know it. The tension had reached such a fever pitch that security personnel were starting to move closer to the stage area, clearly worried about where this might lead. Jimmy noticed the movement and seemed to realize that this situation was spiraling beyond anything that could be salvaged with editing or damage control. You know what, Meghan? If you can't handle being a public figure, if you can't deal with people asking tough questions or making jokes, then maybe you should go back to whatever irrelevant life you had before you married into fame. That final insult was the last straw, and what Meghan did next would end this disastrous interview once and for all. For a moment, complete silence filled the studio as Jimmy's words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Then Meghan's face transformed into something that can only be described as pure, crystallized rage. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was so controlled, it was terrifying. "Irrelevant life?" she repeated slowly, each word dripping with venom. "You mean my life as a successful actress, a university graduate, a humanitarian who was working with the United Nations before you even knew I existed? That irrelevant life?" She took a step closer to Jimmy's desk, and the host instinctively backed away in his chair. "Let me tell you something about irrelevance, Jimmy. Irrelevance is a 56-year-old man who peaked 20 years ago, desperately trying to stay relevant by tearing down women who are actually making a difference in the world. Irrelevance is hiding behind a desk every night, making jokes about people who have accomplished more in a year than you have in your entire pathetic career." The audience was transfixed, watching this complete destruction of their beloved host in real time. Jimmy's face had gone completely pale, sweat beading on his forehead as he realized the magnitude of what he'd unleashed. "Meghan, I think we need to—" "No, you don't get to think anymore tonight," she cut him off viciously. "You've done enough thinking for one evening. You thought it would be funny to ambush me. You thought it would be entertaining to try to humiliate me on live television. You thought I would just sit here and take it like some kind of punching bag? Well, congratulations, Jimmy. You thought wrong." She reached down and grabbed her purse from beside the guest chair, her movements sharp and deliberate. "You know what the real tragedy is here? I came on this show tonight to talk about my work with women's shelters, about the scholarship program I'm launching for young girls in underserved communities. I came here to actually use my platform for something meaningful. But instead, I got ambushed by a washed-up comedian who apparently thinks attacking women is peak entertainment." Jimmy made one last desperate attempt to salvage something from this disaster. "Meghan, please, let's just what, Jimmy? Pretend this didn't happen? Pretend you didn't just show your true colors to millions of viewers? Pretend you didn't just prove every single point I've ever made about how women, especially women of color, are treated by the media?" She slung her purse over her shoulder with a gesture that somehow managed to be both elegant and threatening. "No, I don't think so." She turned to address the stunned studio audience directly, her voice carrying clearly through the deathly quiet space. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to remember what you witnessed here tonight. You saw a woman come on a talk show to discuss her charitable work, and you watched her get systematically attacked, insulted, and degraded by a man who clearly has some very deep-seated issues with successful women who won't be silenced." The audience was completely captivated, many nodding along with her words. Even the camera operators seemed to have forgotten their jobs, just standing there filming this unprecedented moment in television history. Jimmy sat frozen in his chair, apparently unable to process the complete destruction of his reputation, happening in real time. "I want you to think about this the next time you watch this show," Meghan continued, her voice growing stronger and more commanding with each word. "Think about the man behind that desk who gets paid millions of dollars to mock people's pain and trauma. Think about whether that's the kind of entertainment you want to support with your viewership." She turned back to Jimmy one final time, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. "And Jimmy, when you're lying awake tonight wondering how everything went so wrong, remember this: you didn't destroy me tonight. You destroyed yourself. You revealed exactly who you are when you think the cameras are rolling and nobody will hold you accountable. Well, guess what? The cameras were rolling and now everybody knows." With that, she turned on her heel and began walking toward the exit, her head held high despite the chaos she was leaving in her wake. Jimmy finally found his voice, calling out desperately, "Meghan, wait! This isn't how—" She stopped at the edge of the stage and turned back one final time, her voice carrying across the studio with devastating clarity. "This is exactly how it ends, Jimmy. With you sitting there realizing that you picked the wrong woman to try to tear down. Good luck explaining this to your bosses, your sponsors, and your family. You're going to need it." And with that, Meghan Markle walked off the Jimmy Kimmel live stage, leaving behind a host whose career might never recover from the most spectacular self-destruction in late-night television history. The studio audience sat in stunned silence as Jimmy stared at the empty space where his guest had been, finally understanding that he had just witnessed and caused the end of his own reign in Hollywood. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of his humiliation, ensuring that this moment would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. In trying to destroy Meghan Markle, Jimmy Kimmel had instead orchestrated his own downfall, proving, once and for all, that sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted.